So as you might have heard, California is on fire.
California's fire season has been particularly fierce this year, with fires consuming nearly 800,000 acres. Fire seasons are growing more intense, extending longer into fall, and demanding more resources.
In fact, these are the deadliest fires ever recorded in California's history. And you will hear reports on the forest fires, but what you won't hear is even more interesting.
One solution is to use inmates to fight fires.
Camp 13 is a inmate firefighter camp where we are on call up to 7 days a week. We can be called out at any time, day or night.
We basically fight fires.
Yay, women! Women inmates fighting fires makes them feel good. Awesome. All right, job is done. Let's go home. Who wants a sandwich? Here are just a few words not included in NBC's video on the inmates fighting these fires. Capitalism, slave labor, forced labor, prison industrial complex, police state, profit, climate change? How about climate change? Don't want to factor that in there somewhere? Anyway, we'll get to climate change in a minute, but first let's talk about these inmates. As the New York Times claims in their article about it, by choice, for less than $2 an hour, the female inmate firefighters of California worked their bodies to the breaking point. The New York Times reporter said, "I could see why inmates would accept the risks. Compared with life among the general prison population, the conservation camps are bastions of civility. They are less violent and offer more space. They smell of eucalyptus, the ocean, fresh blooms." Ah, fresh blooms as you fight fires as a slave laborer. Keep in mind, per capita, we are the #1 prison nation on this planet. So when you're stuck in prison and you're given a choice of, well, you can go out onto the roads and fight fires and, you know, be out in the sun all day, or you can stay here in a cage fighting gang members all day. Not much of a choice, is it? It's kind of like if you had a scorpion and cobra, and someone was like, which do you want to hold? And then they go, oh, he chose to hold a scorpion. Well, he's dying now, but earlier, it was his choice. These are nonviolent inmates getting paid nothing wages, $1 an hour, $2 an hour. And by the way, when you're in jail, you do have to buy things, toothbrushes and things like that, clothing, and just to make phone calls to your family is often outrageously expensive in prison. Where do they get that money? If you show up broke and poor, well, you do it by working. Massive corporations use this slave labor, which is allowable under our Constitution. About 3,800 inmates, both women and men, fight fires in California, making up about 13% of California's firefighting force. The fire program saves taxpayers $124 million per year, according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Okay, by exploiting these poor, desperate people, we save a few tax dollars. All right, let's do that. What's that average out to? 12 cents a piece per taxpayer? And then they're often not even trained that well. The training they receive, which often lasts as little as 3 weeks, is significantly less than the 3-year apprenticeship that full-time civilian firefighters get. 3 years compared to 3 weeks. One inmate said, "The pay is ridiculous. There are some days when we are worn down to the core, and this isn't that different from slave conditions." And it's not just fires, of course. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, the average pay for a prison worker is 93 cents an hour. California had a years-long litigation over reducing the population of prisons deemed unconstitutionally overcrowded by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2010. One of the reasons the state gave in court for not paroling more inmates in California was because it would be bad for the economy. You know who else argued that? Plantation owners. Not only is it clear that these inmates are being exploited for their situation, but on top of that, we keep them in jail so that we can exploit them. Corporate Democrat du jour, Kamala Harris, was the state attorney general at the time that was argued in court. Of course, when it was revealed to the public, she said she was shocked that her office had ever argued such a thing. Look, this is how late-stage capitalism works. People are desperate, and their desperation is exploited. They're willing to put their lives on the line for pennies. And yet NBC News will report on this like it's a feel-good story. It's the power of women women. Yes, these are strong women, but that doesn't make this good. That doesn't make this happy. That just makes this an example of desperation. All it really shows is what people will do when they have a police state gun to their head and an economic gun to their head. What choice do these people really have? Now let's get to climate change. And believe it or not, yes, this is still a censored side of the story. The clearest way in which global warming increases wildfire risk, one supported by a growing body of peer-reviewed literature, is higher temperature. Warmer air draws moisture from the plants, trees, soil, increasing what's known as fuel aridity. This provides the dry fuel and conditions that feed wildfires. Other climatic factors are also contribute, including decreased rainfall and reduced or earlier melting mountain snowpack. Basically what that quote said is, it's fucking hotter and things catch on fire. They said it different. They put in science words. California had a 5-year drought before these fires. Then there was some rainfall, which they thought was going to ease up the wildfire season this year. However, the rainfall was then followed by record-breaking temperatures that basically took away the result of the rainfall. Here's another quote. Indeed, anthropogenic climate change, which means man-made, has doubled the area scorched by forest fires during the last 3 decades across the American West, burning an additional 16,000 square miles, according to a study last year in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Remember, science, it's that thing most of our politicians want to do away with, but it's still around. You can find it in some circles if you go to like a Comic-Con or something. Park Williams, a bioclimatologist at Columbia University, said in a statement, "We should be getting ready for bigger fire years than those familiar to previous generations." It's gonna get worse. Our country is gonna burn. More than 24 named fires currently burn across Washington and Oregon. More than 1 million acres have burned in Montana. An area larger than Rhode Island has burned in Montana. It's been Montana's 3rd worst fire season on record, and the largest brush fire in the history of Los Angeles happened a few weeks ago. According to climate models, by the end of this century, the western United States is still projected to warm by about another 3.5 degrees Celsius. And when we remember that the relationship between temperature and fire is exponential, we're really talking about a very different western United States in 50 years. These fires are gonna keep getting worse. The hurricanes are gonna keep getting worse. The tornadoes, the flooding, the droughts, they're gonna keep getting worse. We've been convinced by capitalism and consumerism and materialism and all the things we're sold on television that we should be atomized, separated into our tiny little groups, grabbing all we can for ourselves. It's just hoarding into one household. And so we're also taught that we can only act as a single individual, right? Turn off your lights. Bring your tote bag to the grocery store instead of bringing a plastic bag, and that'll save a porpoise. It'll have it on its head for years to come. We're told to act individually. We will not stop climate change or even ease climate change without acting as a group, as a society. We need climate accords that actually fucking mean something. We could fucking change our light bulbs all day long. From here till we're on fire. From here till it's your house. By the way, for those of you who think the Paris Climate Accord meant so much, keep in mind that nearly the same number of nations, or like 120 or whatever, signed a biodiversity accord, agreeing that they all needed to work to increase biodiversity because we're killing off everything. They all agreed on that. 5 years later, after it was signed, I think not a single country had reached the actual biodiversity goals. Sign things all day long. It's about doing it. And step one is to get the truth out there, not to believe bullshit stories like this NBC News. Look at them go! They're prisoners and they're women and they're out there, and we've exploited them so well that they chose to be out there and work for $1 an hour, and they feel good about themselves. Yeah, they chose to be out there over sitting in a moldy jail cell pooping on a public toilet. When we stop believing this shit, that's when we can actually unite together and act to change things. Anyway, keep fighting.